1996. The Constitutional Coup. Chapter 1. The Nuclear Train and the 24-Hour Ultimatum. Imagine this. June 1st, 1996. A heavily loaded train moves slowly toward the Russian border. Inside are the last nuclear warheads that for decades held the Western world in fear. Ukraine is officially disarming. But at that very same moment in Kyiv, the air is electric with tension. President Leonid Kuchma has lost his patience. For 5 years, Parliament has failed to adopt a constitution, stuck in debates with the communist wing that longs for the Soviet past. Kuchma delivers a brutal ultimatum. Either the basic law is adopted within 24 hours or Parliament will be dissolved, and the country will plunge into chaos. 450 deputies are locked in the hall. The doors are barred. It was the longest night in the country's history. 24 hours without sleep, on the brink of exhaustion while the very existence of the independent state hung in the balance. When the sun rose over Kyiv on June 28th, the world woke up to a different reality. Ukraine had finally stepped out of the gray zone and adopted a law where the individual and their freedom were declared the supreme value. Chapter 2. The Industrial Titan and Europe's Energy Heart. There is a stereotype that in the 90s, Ukraine was merely an agrarian region. In reality, it was an industrial giant producing world-class technology. The country's key asset was its gas transport system. In 1996, Ukraine officially secured its status as the main energy vein of the continent. Through its territory ran a unique network of pipelines, including the famous Druzhba, or Friendship line. Built back in the 1960s to supply Europe, this infrastructure in 1996 turned into a powerful tool of geopolitical influence. Space ambitions. While world powers competed in space, the Yuzhmash plant was working at full capacity. It was in 1996 that agreements were finalized for the Sea Launch project and the flight of the first Ukrainian astronaut, Leonid Kadenyuk, on the American shuttle Columbia. Aviation breakthrough. In 1996, the second prototype of the N-70 took to the sky. This military transport aircraft with its unique electronics was a decade ahead of its time. Steel nerves of the economy. The country's exports exceeded $14 billion. Steel from the giants of Mariupol and Hryvnia was shipped to the largest construction sites in the world, from Asia to Europe. Chapter 3. Monetary Reform, the Birth of the Hryvnia. In September 1996, a decisive step toward financial stability was taken. The era of hyperinflation and temporary coupons ended with the introduction of the national currency, the Hryvnia. The exchange was radical. 100,000 old coupons were traded for one new hryvnia. The exchange rate was set at approximately 1.76 to 1.80 hryvnias per $1. To understand the scale of prices, at that time 2 hryvnias could buy a liter of milk and a loaf of bread. Interestingly, the banknotes were not printed in Ukraine. The first batches were manufactured in Canada and the United Kingdom, waiting for years in secret vaults. This reform allowed the internal market to stabilize and sent a clear signal to international investors. Chapter 4. The Constitution and the Architects of Soros. The transition to a market model required the complete dismantling of the Soviet legal foundation. A key role was played by a team of experts supported by George Soros and his Renaissance Foundation. The main result was Article 41 of the new Constitution. In Soviet law, the concept of private property was virtually non-existent. In 1996, it was established as an inviolable principle. Everyone has the right to own, use, and dispose of their property. This became a legal guarantee for international capital. Soros invested significant resources into legal expertise and training a new managerial elite, ensuring Ukraine's integration into Western legal standards. Chapter 5. Russia, 1996. Yeltsin and the Ghost of Communist Revenge. While Ukraine was securing its independence in the Constitution, a political drama was unfolding in neighboring Russia. It was the year of the presidential election. Boris Yeltsin, whose rating initially did not exceed 3%, faced a real threat: the return of the communists led by Gennady Zyuganov.
Western structures and George Soros were active on the Russian field as well, supporting liberal reforms to prevent the restoration of the USSR. Top political consultants worked in Moscow, knowing that a Zyuganov victory would destabilize the entire region. It was this very fact, that Russia was paralyzed by internal crisis and the war in Chechnya, that gave Ukraine a unique window of opportunity to adopt its constitution without direct interference from the Kremlin. Chapter 6. The Geopolitical Triangle. The Price of Recognition and U.S. Taxes. 1996 was the year of fulfilling obligations. Ukraine completed its disarmament, and the international community began to provide large-scale support. Financial support. Ukraine became the second largest recipient of U.S. aid after Israel. These hundreds of millions of dollars coming from the taxes of American citizens became a guarantee of stability in Eastern Europe. The Nunn-Lugar program. Most of the funds were directed toward liquidating missile silos and bombers. This was a direct investment in global security. Missiles aimed at Western cities were turned into scrap metal. IMF loans. The adoption of the Constitution opened the doors to loans from the International Monetary Fund. These were not free grants. They were tough commercial loans with interest, requiring a deep transformation of the economy. The transit tool. In 1996, Kyiv officially began using the transit potential of the Druzhba pipeline as leverage. For the first time, the question of market-based payment for the transit of Russian gas to Europe was raised, marking the beginning of a long-term confrontation of interests in the energy sector. Chapter 7. The Highlight. Atlanta 96. Emerging on the world stage. The symbolic finale of the year was the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, USA. Ukraine competed for the first time as a fully independent team. The appearance of the blue and yellow flag in American stadiums became a visual confirmation for the world that a new power was born. When Lilia Podkopayeva or the young Vladimir Klitschko stood on the podium, the national anthem solemnly played throughout the stadium. For many, it was a revelation. A country that gave up its nuclear arsenal for the sake of recognition proved its strength in fair athletic competition. Ukraine entered the top 10 world sports powers, taking 9th place overall with 9 gold medals. Chapter 8. Conclusion. The point of no return. The year 1996 laid the architecture of the modern world order in Eastern Europe. Ukraine gained its fundamental law, Article 41 on private property, a stable currency and international standing. But it also took on debt obligations and the risk of losing its defense potential. The United States successfully implemented the disarmament program, ensuring the security of its borders through the effective use of budget funds. The ideas of George Soros became a catalyst for the transition from a planned economy to a capitalist model. It was the year of the final break with the imperial past. To the sounds of the anthem in Atlanta and the signatures on the Articles of the Constitution, Ukraine began its sovereign journey. Outro. The events of 1996 are just one chapter in the complex history of relations between great powers. We will continue to reconstruct the chronicle of how the modern world was created. Subscribe to follow the development of history, year by year. Like this video if you believe it is important to understand the true causes of global changes. And write in the comments, was the exchange of nuclear status for economic reforms and a constitution justified? Your participation makes history come alive. See you in the next episode.